Before we begin, take a breath. This isn't just a podcast, it's a new way to think, speak, and live in English. Welcome to Confluent Podcast, where words flow, confidence grows, and every sip brings you closer to fluency. Today we are doing a deep dive into some source material that is pretty much going to blow up everything you thought you knew about learning a language.
Yeah, completely. I mean, imagine learning an entire language, getting to absolute fluency without ever touching a flashcard.
Yeah.
Or, filling out those awful grammar workbooks,
I hated those.
right? Or taking a single grammar test. The evidence we're looking at today basically suggests that your traditional English textbook is, it's actually the primary thing holding you back.
Which is just a massive claim, because for most of us, when we think of language learning, we picture exactly that. Staring at whiteboards, grinding through verb conjugations, and then
just completely freezing up when you try to actually talk to a real person.
Yes, exactly. It's like all that studying just evaporates. So our mission in this deep dive is to figure out how you can rapidly accelerate your vocabulary and your speaking confidence by totally changing your approach. We're talking about avoiding the boring textbook trap entirely.
It really requires a complete paradigm shift. Like, the methodology here asks you to stop treating English like a math formula, where you have to plug in the right variable to get the perfect sentence.
Right, because language isn't math.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead, you have to treat it like an ocean. You don't solve an ocean, you swim in it. The whole goal is to remove all that traditional friction, I guess, so you can just acquire the language naturally, sort of the same way you learned your very first language as a kid.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can talk about exactly how to learn this way, we have to establish what we should actually be focusing on first. Like, we need a hierarchy of importance.
We do. And right out of the gate, there is a super clear consensus in the materials we reviewed. Basically, vocabulary is vastly, vastly more important than grammar when it comes to basic communication.
Vastly more important, which goes against every class I ever took.
Right, but it's the ultimate survival rule. Like, if you step back and think about it logically, it makes perfect sense. Imagine you have flawless grammar. You understand the mechanics of every single past perfect tense.
But you literally don't know any nouns or verbs.
Exactly. You can't communicate at all. I mean, unless you're playing charades or drawing little pictures on a napkin, perfect grammar with zero vocabulary just leaves you stranded.
Totally. And there's this really funny but highly illustrative example given in the research. Imagine you're traveling, you're totally lost, and you walk up to a local on the street, and you say these exact words: "Bus where stop go need I." Okay.
Which is just a total catastrophe grammatically.
Oh, complete chaos. It violates literally every rule of syntax.
But put yourself in the shoes of the person hearing that. If they are even slightly patient, what are they going to do?
They're going to point down the street to the bus stop.
Exactly. They know exactly what you need because the core meaning is all carried by the vocabulary.
I like to think about it this way. Grammar is kind of like the traffic laws, but vocabulary is the actual car.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like, you can drive a car poorly. You might ignore the speed limit. You might bump into the curb a little bit. Your steering is probably jerky, but you will still eventually arrive at your destination.
Yeah, but you absolutely cannot drive the traffic rules. You need the vehicle first.
You have to have the car. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, prioritizing vocabulary first does something really profound for your psychology.
It really does. Think about, the listener right now who freezes up during a business meeting. They have a great idea to share, but they just sit there in silence. Why?
Because they're terrified of saying it wrong.
Exactly. Their brain is desperately trying to calculate the perfect grammatical structure before they even open their mouth. Focusing on grammar first breeds a fear of making mistakes.
Right.
Creates this massive barrier of silence.
Yeah, you spend so much cognitive energy trying to build the absolute perfect sentence that the conversation just moves on without you. It's so frustrating.
But when you focus on vocabulary first, you arm yourself with the raw tools to at least try.
Yeah.
You build that immediate confidence you need to jump in, even if it's messy.
So if vocabulary is the vehicle, the immediate question is logistical. How do we build a massive vocabulary as quickly as possible?
And this brings us to a concept that challenges pretty much every study tool we've relied on in school. We really have to differentiate between deep learning and wide learning.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because deep learning is the traditional model, right? It's what we all did. You take one textbook chapter and you drill it 50 times.
Yeah, you review the exact same 20 vocab words until they are supposedly burned into your brain forever.
Right. And does the source material say deep learning is totally useless?
Well, No, it has its place. Like, if you're trying to master a really specific physical pronunciation of a sound, sure. But for vocabulary, for acquiring the thousands of words you actually need to be fluent, the materials are adamant that deep learning is actually a trap.
Wow.
Yeah. They say you need wide learning.
Wide learning being like the consumption of massive quantities of new material, just a tidal wave of text, easy books, medium books, articles, magazines.
Exactly. And the most striking part of this recommendation, and this is crazy, is the explicit advice to completely abandon flashcards.
Wait, really? No flashcards at all?
None. The instruction is to prioritize massive quantity over perfect quality of comprehension. The school system relies on rote memorization, staring at a single word on a piece of cardboard.
Or like swiping on an app for hours.
Right. But biology doesn't work that way. Your brain is this highly advanced pattern recognition machine. It learns through varied context, not sterile repetition.
Okay, but my instinct is to push back on this. Like, wait, so we are supposed to just read without trying to memorize the words. Doesn't that go against literally everything the school system taught us about studying?
It does, but we have to make a distinction. I mean, repetition is how we learn to play the piano, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or shooting a basketball. Why is language different?
Because piano and basketball are motor skills. They require muscle memory. Language comprehension is a cognitive pattern recognition skill. Seeing a word 15 times on the same exact flashcard is incredibly boring to your brain. It lacks emotional context.
Because it's just sitting there isolated in a vacuum.
Exactly. But imagine seeing that same word 15 times across 15 completely different sentences. You see it in chapter 1 of a thriller, then maybe in an article about finance, then in a romance novel.
Oh, I see. So your brain is encountering the word attached to different emotions, different characters, different scenarios.
Yes, and that varied context naturally weaves the word into your long-term memory way better than any drill ever could.
I love that. It's like seeing a word on a flashcard is essentially like looking at a stranger's driver's license.
Right.
Like you know their height, their weight, their address, you have their stats, but you don't actually know their personality at all.
That is exactly it. Seeing a word functioning inside a story is like actually having dinner with them.
Yeah.
You see how they behave, how they interact with other words, what their nuances are.
But practically speaking, this introduces a huge hurdle for the listener. If we throw away the flashcards and we're just reading quickly to get this massive volume, how do we handle the frustration?
The frustration of not knowing the words.
Yeah. Because if I pick up a novel in another language right now and I don't know, like 30% of the words on the page, I am going to get incredibly frustrated and probably just quit.
And that frustration is exactly what kills the reading habit for most people. But this is where the materials pivot to a very specific tech-assisted strategy to fix that, the e-reader method.
Okay, so this involves using a Kindle, an iPad, or even just the reading app on your phone, something with a built-in dictionary.
Right. The workflow is incredibly specific, though. You're reading your story, you see an unknown word, you simply tap the word with your finger.
And a quick definition pops up on the screen.
Exactly. You read the definition, and this is the critical part. You do not write it down.
Wait, you don't log it in a notebook?
No notebook. No studying it. You simply look at the definition, dismiss it, and immediately keep reading.
My initial reaction to that is, if I don't write it down, I'm going to forget it by the time I turn the page.
Oh, you definitely will. You will forget almost all the words you look up the first time. But that is the entire point of the wide learning volume. Because you are reading such a massive amount of text, you will inevitably see that exact same word again a few chapters later.
And then what? I just tap it again.
You tap it again, you'll probably forget it again.
Yeah.
But by the 5th time or the 12th time you tap it, your brain starts to recognize the visual pattern. The context clicks, and the word is yours permanently.
What's fascinating here is how that protects the actual joy of reading. Like, traditional reading in a foreign language meant stopping every 2 minutes, picking up a massive paper dictionary.
Flipping through all the pages.
Yes. Finding the word, and by then you've totally forgotten what was even happening in the story. It destroyed all the momentum.
Exactly. This tap-and-go method respects your cognitive load. By not stressing over capturing every single word, you maintain your momentum. You actually stay engaged with the plot.
It reminds me of watching a really fast-paced foreign movie with subtitles. You don't pause the movie every 10 seconds to analyze the grammar of the dialogue.
If you did that, you'd ruin the movie.
Right. You just let the context wash over you until the plot makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But what if the tap to translate isn't enough? Like if I encounter a whole paragraph that makes absolutely no sense even after tapping the words, am I just supposed to trust the context?
Pretty much. The assumption in the source material is that complete comprehension is an illusion anyway. If a sentence is completely baffling, the instruction is to just ignore it and move on.
Really? Just skip it.
Yep. Think of it like sitting in a loud restaurant with a friend. You don't actually hear every single syllable they say. The noise drowns some of it out.
Oh, for sure. But you catch enough key words to get the gist and laugh at the joke.
Exactly. You rely on context.
That permission to just skip the hard stuff is so liberating. It turns reading from a stressful test into an actual hobby. So once you're armed with this e-reader method, the question becomes, what is the ideal content diet? What should you actually be reading?
The analysis is very firm on this. There is no such thing as the perfect vocabulary book.
So no searching for the ultimate English frequency list novel?
Nope. The absolute golden rule is that you must read what you genuinely enjoy.
Ugh.
Because if it's boring, you won't sustain the habit for the hours needed to see results.
Makes sense. And the materials provide a huge spectrum of examples, right? Like if you want a challenge, you could tackle heavy adult fiction, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell.
Which are culturally rich, but yeah, very dense. If that's too heavy, they highly recommend children's chapter books, Goosebumps, Nancy Drew. Because they're engaging, but the sentence structures are way more accessible.
Or nonfiction, like self-help books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or even sports journalism.
Yes. And one of the most surprising recommendations: manga, graphic novels, and comic books.
I love that they included that because I think a lot of adult learners feel guilty reading comics, like it's not real studying.
But the materials specifically highlight manga as a treasure trove for casual conversational slang. Textbook English sounds so incredibly rigid. Hello, how are you today? I am fine, thank you.
Nobody actually talks like that.
Exactly. People use idioms, fragments, slang. Comic books rely entirely on dialogue, so they bridge the gap between written English and actual real-world conversations.
I mean, I want to ask the listener directly right now, what are you passionate about? Because whatever that is your next English textbook.
That's the mindset shift right there. And to supercharge whatever content you pick, the sources outline this triple power combination.
Oh, right, the sensory stacking. So step 1 is what we just talked about. Read the book yourself on an e-reader, tap and go.
Step 2 is to get the audiobook version of that exact same book and listen to it.
Which is vital because English spelling is, frankly, chaotic. Just because you can read a word doesn't mean you know how to say it.
Right, listening to the audiobook bridges that phonetic gap. You hear the natural rhythm, the stress on syllables, the emotion. You link the visual code to the auditory code.
And then step 3 completes the triad, right? You watch or listen to a book club discussion or a YouTube review talking about the chapters you just read.
Exactly. It adds a social element. You hear native speakers debating the plot using the exact same vocabulary you just read and listened to. It's this brilliant immersion loop.
But, you know, inevitably, this brings up the elephant in the room.
The traditionalists.
Yeah, the people who spent years diagramming sentences are going to listen to this and say, okay, reading comic books and skipping hard sentences sounds fun, but what about the rules? How do I learn to spell? Won't I sound totally uneducated at my corporate job?
This raises an important question. It really does. It's a very understandable fear. But the evidence suggests the exact opposite outcome. Let's take spelling, for example.
Right, instead of writing a word 20 times on lined paper.
When you practice wide learning, your brain is taking microscopic, high-speed photographs of letter arrangements thousands of times a day. It's all about visual familiarity.
Oh, so if I read the word beautiful spelled correctly 200 times in a month of reading thrillers, my brain just internalizes that visual architecture.
Precisely. So when you sit down to write an email and accidentally type it wrong, it triggers a visual dissonance.
Yeah.
It literally looks ugly to your brain, even if you can't recite the actual spelling rule.
You just instinctively know it's off. And that exact same mechanism applies to grammar. You just unconsciously absorb the syntax. You don't need to clinically identify a dangling modifier.
You just know how a sentence is supposed to flow because you've seen the pattern thousands of times.
Yeah.
And this leads to a really fascinating critique in the materials about the academic illusion.
Yes. This part was so validating to read.
Right. The research points out that academic writers, university professors, they frequently write using incredibly dense, convoluted vocabulary.
And society conditions us to read those papers and think, wow, those words are impenetrable. This person must be a genius. I need to speak like that in my meetings to be taken seriously.
But the material calls this out as a complete fallacy. It argues that many academics write that way intentionally to appear more intellectual than they actually are.
Or to hide the fact that their core ideas are actually super simple. They just hide a lack of substance behind a massive wall of jargon.
It raises such an important question. Why do we equate complicated, exhausting language with intelligence when true mastery is actually the ability to explain complex things simply?
Totally. The materials reference Alan Watts to make this point, the 20th century British philosopher.
Watts is the perfect example. He took incredibly abstract Zen Buddhist concepts and translated them for Western audiences without using any academic jargon.
Just metaphors about waves on the ocean, everyday language.
And his clarity didn't diminish his intelligence. It proved his absolute mastery. Clear, direct language is always superior to convoluted jargon.
It's the ultimate confidence move. You don't need a complicated word when a simple one works perfectly. And you don't learn those subtle nuances from a bilingual dictionary anyway.
No, you learn them from reading widely in context. Like the difference between judging someone and criticizing them.
Right. If you look those up in a dictionary, they seem nearly identical. But if you read widely, you see how they behave in the wild.
You realize judging is a necessary, neutral evaluation. You have to judge if a situation is safe or if a proposal is sound.
But criticizing has a negative emotional connotation. It's about pointing out faults or tearing someone down. You only grasp that emotional weight by seeing the words interact in a story, not on a flashcard.
Exactly. And we really should remind the listener that many native English speakers struggle with grammar and spelling too. This immense pressure to achieve textbook perfection is an illusion. The goal is connection and clarity.
So, what does this all mean? Let's bring all these threads together. If you want to rapidly accelerate your fluency, you have to prioritize vocabulary over grammar. The car matters more than the traffic laws right now.
Abandon the sterile deep learning. Embrace wide learning. Read massive amounts of content you actually find thrilling.
Use your tech. Tap the word, glance at the translation, and keep moving. Don't slow down to memorize it. Trust your brain's biology to absorb the patterns through sheer volume. And use the triple power combo. Read, listen, and engage.
And let go of the academic illusion. Embrace clear, simple language. It's about moving from studying to actually experiencing English.
That is the exact journey we are on together. We're building that natural, effortless confidence.
It all comes back to trusting your mind's ability to adapt when it's immersed in a rich environment. Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over today.
I love this part.
If our brains are truly hardwired to absorb complex systems like language naturally, through stories, context, and enjoyment, rather than painful rules, what other difficult skills in your life are you currently trying to painfully memorize, when you should really just be finding a way to experience them?